Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
So, welcome to our last workshop for the school year. Everybody didn't have to break out in applause at the moment. We'll save that for later this afternoon. But we do have three items that we want to address during our workshop. First up is the consolidated grant application for federal programs. Dr. Boone.
Thank you. As we indicated to the board last meeting, that we would be vetting this information and providing it to the board as part of our requirement for board approval prior to submission to the state. The consolidated application is used, as you see here, for Titles 1, 2, and 3. It used to be an option for districts, and now it's a requirement that the application become a consolidated application. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Rogers and Ms.
Malinak.
Malinak. Ms. Fissner is Ms. Malinak. And so,
Okay. Can you just pause for a minute? Sir, you can come on down and have a seat.
hey, Mr. Smith, watch your head, because I think you're touching the board.
I was trying to
changing
figure
slides.
out what was happening.
It's a smart touch.
Janelle, can you?
Ready to put the
Yeah.
We can go back to the beginning. I think Mr. Smith's head touched it.
Well, while we're fixing that, good evening, Chairman Jordan, school board members, Dr. Boone. This afternoon, as Dr. Boone shared, we will be giving you a high-level overview of the consolidated application. And if you remember last year, we returned to it after having left from the consolidated application from some time ago. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Malinak.
Thank you, Chairman Jordan, members of the board, Dr. Boone. We will do a high-level overview for the consolidated application for federal funds for Titles 1, 2, and 3. Virginia Department of Education does require that we present this to the board for approval and a vote before we can submit it. The due date is July 1st, so this is good timing for us to talk with you. The first part is the Title I application. Every year, the preliminary allocations are based on poverty and population estimates from the most recent census data, which in this case is 2015. Our preliminary allocations released from the Department of Education show that we have approximately $14.8 million as our preliminary allocation, which is lower than last year's preliminary allocation. The final allocation that will be released in October, November-ish will be lower. It always is, because they do have to factor in our private school bypass that we participate in so that Title I eligible students at private schools can be served, as well as other state set-asides, such as simply the administration costs from VDOE. Tiffany Spate from accounting is here if you have any questions. She helped, did a lot of the legwork on the actual budgetary part of the application. When you look at the preliminary allocation from last year and the amount that we budgeted for this year, it is about a 10% reduction in funding. The next slide shows our Title I schools for next year. We will stay at 34 Title I schools with a slight adjustment in which schools those are. We will be adding Booker T. Washington High School as a Title I school next year. We've removed Willoughby Elementary as they transition to a pre-K center. We will continue to support Willoughby Elementary through Title I funds and VPI funds for their preschool programs. Overall, that would be 29 elementary schools, 4 middle schools, and 1 high school. The schools themselves, we've been working with the schools. I have been since February trying to identify what they want to do with their funds that they receive. Despite the estimated reduction that we're receiving, we're actually pushing more money out to the schools this year than we did last year. Last year they had approximately 8.3 thousand from our allocation. This year it'll be 8.7 thousand. I'm sorry, no, 8,000. No, 8 million. I'm sorry, 8.7 million. 61% of our overall funding does go to the schools when you do the percentage, which is a good amount to go to them. Out of the remaining 39%, 20% goes to the Title I preschool program. That's in the form of the salaries and benefits for the teachers, as well as field trips and supplies for the classes. On the remaining, out of the remaining 19%, those funds go to support Camp Young, their programming and staff, division level support, priority school support, family engagement, support for community facilities that serve neglected students, and the ARA department also has some personnel funded under Title I. In working with the schools, as I mentioned before, they submitted their plans to me in terms of what they wanted to do staffing-wise, as well as what they wanted to do with their additional funds. I won't read this to you, but as you can see, this is their plans for what they would like to do with their funding based on their school needs and their data. I will point out the first bullet, the Title I teachers, those are formerly interventionists, so you might hear those words used interchangeably for a while as people learn the new title of that position. It's essentially the same position. We just simply retooled it slightly with a new name to provide some accountability as well as some CAB level support in terms of professional development and some collegial meetings where they can talk about what they do at their individual schools. That's the last slide for Title I. The next slide is Title II. Dr. Cataldo and his team worked very closely with me on developing what they wanted to do with their Title II funds. We are anticipating a $400,000 reduction in funding for Title II, but as you can see, these are the plans for the Title II funds. And the last slide is Title III. We are anticipating level funding. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a slight increase since our numbers have gone up. And Dr. Cataldo and Meredith Hobson worked closely with me to develop the application for this, and this is their intended use of the funding for Title III. Of course, the application is much larger if you printed it out. So this is really a high-level overview, and if you have any specific questions, I certainly can take those.
Full application is attached, and I'm very appreciative, Dr. Cataldo, Ms. Malinek, Dr. Rogers, and Meredith Hobson, and all who vet what's going on. And I also want to acknowledge the executive directors of schools who've also worked very closely with the principals in looking at the alignment of the funds based on the school's needs, what their instructional focus is, and where they see gaps. So it was very important that we made sure that we weren't making unilateral decisions for principals, but rather principals were fully engaged in the thinking and in the planning for their schools around these funds, particularly the Title I.
Dr. Robinson?
I'm excited that you've identified that you can push out more money to the schools this year than last year. How are you able to do that?
A variety of ways. We factored in originally we actually thought there'd be an actual decrease because of the pay and comp study. We were able to look at crunching some numbers, realizing we didn't have to put so much into salary and benefits at the division level to cover the pay and comp study. So we were able to take the savings from that. And again, I give kudos to Tiffany for really crunching those numbers. We took that savings and pushed it directly out to the school. We have shaved down at the division level some of the expenses for preschool. Some of the division level supplies and professional development, some of the expenses that we did for bringing people in under contract services or for supply funds. So we're going to use what we've already got, what we have already in our arsenal. And so instead of keeping that money at the division level, we're able to push that out as well. So there are a variety of cost-saving measures that we just literally shaved, much like we did during the regular budget cycle, to see how we could push more money out to the schools.
Very good.
Dr. Gabriel?
I have a few questions. With the item on page 4 of the document about monies going to support community facilities, can you give me an example of just a community facility that you're talking about?
Sure. Barry Robinson Center is an example. We also have a couple of group homes in the area, and this is a new part of the Title I application. In the past, you may have heard us reference Title I Part D, which is for neglected and delinquent. It's a portion of Title I. Since we did not identify any delinquent students on the October count last year, all of our identified students, the 78 that we had at various facilities across Norfolk, they were all in the neglected category. The way VDOE is doing this now is that we have to serve them under what's called the neglected set aside. And so we have to In the same vein that we service the students that go to our schools, we provide money like they're a private school almost, if you will, work in conjunction, enter in an MOU with these facilities if they choose to participate, and we provide funding for them for tutoring services if they want to hire tutors to come in, if they want to go to a professional development opportunity, basically to serve those neglected students that live in those facilities, live in those group homes that might need that extra support from a Title I perspective. So this is all very new. I've met with several of the facilities already, and they have all, I think, are very appreciative of the opportunities. But that Barry Robinson Center is a perfect example.
And then with regards to the interventionists, now Title I teachers, they will be, as I understood the position before, they will be directly interacting with the students themselves.
Yes, and that was one of the things we retooled in the job description. 75% of their time will be spent with students, the other 25% planning for that 75% of time that is with students.
Okay.
And that can include planning with other classroom teachers, the building as a whole, the instructional focus and all of that.
In general, I really appreciate this overview. Thank you.
Cool.
So given the uncertainty in DC, and I know you said in Title I, the amount actually allocated to schools, well, the amount allocated to schools increased, but given the uncertainty in DC, are we likely to see a reduction, and how early will we know that?
We already factored in that 10% reduction from last year's preliminaries this year. Tiffany, again, give her kudos. She did a lot of historical analysis of when we got preliminary allocations in years past, and then we got our final allocation, what was the difference, and how has that been historically, so that we could look and see, well, how much should we then anticipate for this year as well. So when we built the budget, we built that budget with that historical data already in place. So we feel confident that we will not receive anything lower than this. We've worked with VDOE. One way that we hope that we won't have as much taken out. This year we don't have to participate, or let me not use that word, we do not have to contribute to the school improvement set aside that typically we have to. So all schools, they shave off the top certain things for VDOE. All schools that receive an increase in Title I have to contribute to the pot of money that's in school improvement. We don't have to contribute this year because we took a reduction. In years past, we've had to, and I believe it was a pretty 7%, I believe is what we had to contribute in the past. This year, we don't. Now, we still have to participate in school improvement activities as required by law, but we don't have to contribute to the funds that is supporting that. So that should help our overall, our final allocation not maybe be as severe of a reduction as before. But we're pretty confident that this is where it will be.
And this is where we are based on what we know.
Yeah.
There's still the longer-term uncertainty given whatever happens with the federal budget, and that was going to be my closing comment.
Well, that was the uncertainty in DC I was speaking.
Yeah,
that's what I
and
thought you
so certainly the interesting piece with federal funding is because their fiscal year is October to September 30th, sometimes we have funds in advance. We're hoping that the FY18 budget will be a hell harmless year, that will be solid based on what's happening, and not that they're going to actually pull money out during the school year. But these are three of the grants that we're watching very closely because Title I is proposed in the White House budget to be totally eliminated. Right. I mean, Title II.
Title II, yeah.
Please, let me correct that. Media here. Title II is in the federal budget to be totally eliminated. Right. We also know that what's in the White House budget talks about significant shifts to dollars within Title I, not to reduce the dollars available, but to move the available dollars to charter and tuition vouchers and that type of thing. So there's so much uncertainty with the federal budget. Same thing, given some of the tone and tenor relative to immigration and whatever else, it'd be interesting to see if anything is done with Title III, because that is our support for English language learners and students of whom English is a second language. So I'm not breathing a sigh of relief yet until we know what's happening in Congress, what will happen. Not hearing much. We've heard some pushback from certain congressmen about aspects of the budget as it relates to education and what they're not in favor of. But how that all plays out, we'll watch through the summer. And knowing that Congress is on vacation the month of August and they have to have a budget by September 30th.
They'll pass another continuing resolution.
Yeah, exactly.
Kicking the can down the road.
Dr. Robson, you
I have one more question here. How does transportation factor into this year's budget for pre-K students?
That is through VPI and through local funding. It will not come from Title I funding because we don't transport the 3-year-olds, and that's what our Title I funding supports, are the 3-year-old programs.
Okay, so it's the just for my own clarification, the transportation is for 4-year-olds?
Correct.
That's
And
correct.
it comes out of local funding and VPI.
That's correct. You will recall that in the budget year that we're finishing, FY17, we purchased buses. The city helped us with the purchase of buses for preschool, and we had positions in. The buses were a longer time coming. It takes about 6 months to get a bus in. So we're actively recruiting drivers. So we have the buses. Now we have to find the drivers to fill those positions, and we have accounted for those in the budget.
And how many are those?
14.
14 buses.
else? So I just have one. Can you re-clarify for us the impact of Booker T being now Title I high school, what that means in terms of why it qualifies, and the fact that doesn't mean we get any extra money as a part of it.
I'll start. Kip and Jamie fill in any missing pieces. The federal government sets an upper limit that if schools reach that threshold or beyond, they must be served as a Title I school unless the district decides to offset the same amount of Title I funds that would have been available to that school if it was designated Title I. In this particular case, we're talking roughly $338,000 that will be the earmark based on Booker T's enrollment. Booker T crossed that 75% threshold in terms of free reduced lunch eligibility. I believe they're at 76%. And with our budget situation, the only way we could prevent them from becoming a Title I school is to find $338,000 in the existing budget as that offset for direct Title I provision of services. We all know our budget, and we didn't have that flexibility or that latitude to do that. So the resources, the money will flow with the school. They will work on their plan and how they intend to use those resources. But with those funds become the accountability requirements that go along with all Title I schools, such as meeting those annual measurable objectives and what used to be called AYP and all of that. So there are additional accountability requirements that the school is going to have to meet beyond the requirements for accreditation, the impact, the role of graduation in the accreditation, and now they'll have the gap closure pieces in terms of the annual measurable objectives.
Thank you. Anything else? Thank you all for bringing this to us and for all the work and number crunching that I hear was involved with putting this together. And so we'll move forward. So thank you again.
Thank you all.
All right. Ask if we can make a slight adjustment to the agenda and do the policy review. Just because for time purposes. So next on the agenda, we'll do our policy review. Dr. Boone.
Looking for Dr. Birdsong. Come on, join us. So there's one policy that's on for review, JHCF, which is school wellness. And certainly I will also look to members of the board who serve on the policy committee to support. Dr. Lands is also part of this. I apologize. I wasn't looking fully around the corner. And others. I see Helen Phillips is here, Derek Person. So we have all of the team that support the aspects of the wellness policy in attendance. So I'll turn it over to you all.
Good afternoon, Mr. Jordan, Dr. Gabriel, members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity this afternoon to present the new school wellness policy. We have several iterations of the policy that we've worked through to provide to you a draft copy of the policy this afternoon. Dr. Lance has done a phenomenal job of leading the policy work with the SHAC and other members of our school division, such as Mr. Person, who is the coordinator for health and physical education, and Mrs. Helen Phillips. She's here representing school nutrition. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lance, and she will guide and lead our discussion this afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Birdsong. As Dr. Birdsong mentioned, for the last several months, we have worked extensively with our School Health Advisory Committee along with our subcommittees to arrive where we are today, and have had many different discussions about wellness and the different areas that we feel would be most important for our students and families and staff members related to wellness in Norfolk Public Schools. And so there are some areas that we will point out that have been part of our discussions, as well as, of course, ask if there are any questions that you might have of us as we move through the policy. And so one of the areas that we'd like to point out is dealing with the school wellness champions, and that is one of the components that we had talked about in the past related to some budget implications, as well as an exciting new opportunity possibly for our school district, where we would have staff members in each building, a specific staff member who would be identified to support and further the work of wellness across our school district. And so I wanted to point that piece out. If I'll move through them if appropriate, and then if there are specific questions that you might have related to those specific areas. So I'm referencing the wellness champions as far as that piece is concerned. There are many different components of the comprehensive, oh yes, ma'am, okay.
You done with wellness champions, or?
Sort of, but
I have a question.
I mean, I was going to highlight the areas and
Well,
then
you
let
mentioned the fiscal impact, but I wasn't sure what it is. So, the
Okay.
concern and I still have some questions, yes. Still have some questions
Okay.
based upon some questions I had about the policy, but in specific to wellness champions. So can you just elaborate, is this something that we're adding to somebody's plate? And if so, how is that determined? And then, is there a fiscal impact? And if so, then how are we going to address it?
As far as the positions, yes, it would involve, we had talked about a specific stipend, such as other stipends that we have with other positions across the district, where a staff member in each building would be identified. We had talked about there's flexibility in terms of which position that might be. Ideally, we would be considering, or the building principals would be considering, a staff member who has an interest already and works directly with wellness, or has an interest in physical education or other areas that would be, as the title suggests, a champion within the school. And so we hadn't identified a specific staff member that might involve, and we wanted to make sure that it was an opportunity, not something that was assigned to someone that would be considered a chore per se, but someone who has a passion for that already in the school, and that would be very interested in supporting that and supporting all of the efforts of the policy, as well as might have specific ideas about other things that they think might support the work and the wellness of our children and staff.
So when you say it's not a chore, I'm just asking just from a policy perspective, because
Yes, sir.
what we've heard in the past is we're trying to take things off of someone's plate.
Right.
So the policy, as I read it, is requiring a wellness champion. Is that correct?
Yes.
So if you're in a school and you don't have a volunteer that wants to be the wellness champion, then we're going to assign someone to be the wellness champion, correct? And then you're proposing a stipend. Is that stipend paid for through the local operating budget, or is it something associated with some other means that we're going to support that?
Elsie and I spoke about this, good afternoon, everyone, the other day, and I have had a thought, and I have posed the question that could it possibly be funded from my budget? And that is a possibility. We don't have a definite answer yet. So that would then not impact NPS budget at all because the school nutrition budget is independent of that one. So.
Read my mind.
Well, and because where we are as a district, we have not built in an additional stipend group for next year's budget, and so we would have to figure out, is this a 1 year do it on our tab, and then next year we try to fund it. But so we're eagerly awaiting the response if we can use additional funding source.
Dr. Gabriel, then Dr. Robinson.
So I would look at this as a possible cost-saving measure, and I'll tell you why. Because if we implement this wellness champion and we improve the health and promote good health within our staff and students, it decreases absenteeism. We know that our health insurance continues to increase with our teachers, and there are a lot of other companies and divisions that reward their employees based on no smoking, decreased blood pressure, weight, and when our kids are in school, because they're not missing it for asthma, which we have one of the highest populations of children with asthma in our division, we are going to get that money because they're in the building. And so this position, although stipend is the word that we're going to use, I think it's actually going to help us to, over the long haul, increase our funds in the division. And that might be something that we can study and look at.
And just for clarity, I'm not opposed to the champion or the wellness policy. But what I've learned in my time here is that school board members and other folks come and go and policies live forever. And we've talked continuously about taking things off the plate, and so I just want to make sure that we are still aligned with that goal when we create new things for individuals to follow. Mr. Esper?
Question. It's a thought in my head. So, when you are assigning one of these wellness champions, I'm sorry. I can project, hopefully, loud enough. So when you're assigning this wellness champion that is not a volunteer, let's say it is an athletic trainer that is a teacher in the school for high school purposes, and that trainer will, be gone within the next 2 to 3 years. They don't stay for long. A new one comes in, most likely fresh out of college in their practice. How do they now focus on this role, since you're mentioning things on people's plate, with the adjustment of also becoming a teacher and working within a school?
One of the things we envision is flexibility from building to building and position to position, and so we don't necessarily envision that every person will be doing exactly the same thing, and so I can definitely appreciate those concerns in terms of depending on the staff member in that particular role, but I mentioned the flexibility and that the positions would be varied because it all depends on what the wellness champion and the wellness committee might have in terms of what work they might be doing. You might have noticed in the policy that some of the things are very specific in terms of bringing some of the district initiatives forward, as well as there may be things that the school already has in place. Another piece, and I'll mention ideally again, that there will be other staff members in the building who would support the work, hence the wellness champions or the wellness committee, so that it's not just on one person in terms of, so a brand new teacher or a staff member who has a significant workload already would have other people who have similar interests or who have an interest in doing some of what Dr. Gabriel and others have mentioned related to the work. So we definitely, while the champion is the champion, hope to increase interest, access interest that's already there in terms of helping to keep and make our students and staff healthy. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and I want to add the other districts that have instituted wellness champions. While the the idea that, you know, we anticipated the question about, you know, there's a lot of things on my plate, you know, comments like that, but this is one thing that other districts have found easier to attract somebody to take this on, because it's something that, you know, as Dr. Gabriel mentioned, I think people can see the long-term benefits for themselves, for the students, and, you know, it's fun, and I think there are resources that we can put in place to help the champion to streamline things so that we do want to have, as outlined in the policy, some things that are done at every school, obviously that are indicated in the policy, but there are also resources that we can provide to make it easy, like what are some breaks, you know, activities that you could do for active breaks in the classroom. So I think there are ways to make it not as tedious for the person who takes on that role.
Just like with any other stipend, it can be divided amongst 2 people, 3 people. So if a principal decides that he or she wants more than one champion for the school and to divide those responsibilities, they have the flexibility to do so.
Dr. Robinson.
Just a quick comment and question. One, I think it's going to be easy to attract a wellness champion. Think of it as a coach. Someone goes into coaching because they love it. They teach. They're teaching. They love coaching. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. It's not going to. We have to reframe the thought process of adding something onto someone else's plate. Kind of ironic we're using that metaphor, but anyway, I think that's not going to be as a big issue as you may anticipate.
Well, it's not that I anticipate.
Well,
I'm just trying to make sure that we are aligning the policy with what our goals have been.
And quite frankly, if we give $1,000 stipend to a wellness person, it's only $45,000 investment to. I'm just saying. I'm just bringing out the numbers. I know you have that. That's an issue.
I like that response. Yeah, and to say,
And my question is, the way I read the policy is it's primarily directed to students. Where is the specifically are we going to include teachers, the staff? Because that is where the cost savings comes in. If we have healthier, maybe I just missed it. So if I missed it, then I stand corrected. But I think that's important that we include the staff, and I'm hoping that this is not a standalone policy, that we add in there families too, because the real issue is what goes on when the kids go home at night and when and what happens on the weekends. So I think we need to look at the long picture of it. Not only are we going to influence the students and the staff during the school day, but how do we get a broader reach?
Okay. Well, I was going to say the one thing, too, to Dr. Gabriel's comment about discounts or other opportunities we have because of personal wellness and health choices that employees make. We do have that as part of our health insurance. So there's a non-smokers discount if we participate in the biometric screening and do certain things. So there are some incentives within our health insurance plans currently.
Ms. Doyle.
A little bit about the school health index. How is that being developed? What does that measure? Who's being measured? How is that being reported out?
As far as, I didn't know if you were going to comment.
No, I'll let you.
We talked about having the opportunity to do that and to measure so that we would be able to know over time in terms of track how this is working, not just the Wellness Champions piece, but measuring health in general across the district, and thought that it would be very important to help us stay in front of and as well as be in the forefront of knowing what types of changes, what types of trends nationally that we might want to incorporate into the work that we're doing in the district. We talked about and included within the policy in terms of every 3 years or so to make sure that we stayed current and that we didn't ever get into a position where, these are just words on paper and, we aren't able to keep this moving within the district and to try to continue to make improvements. And so,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. No, you can go
finish.
ahead. You can go ahead.
Oh. Well, you asked where it was coming from, and the School Health Index is a evidence-based tool that's developed by the CDC. So it's not something that we're developing or
Right.
it's tasked to us. It's an established tool that the schools use to assess where they are. So each school building would administer that tool, and that would be used to help guide the programming, at the division level and then at the school level as well. So.
There's a fundraising component. Could that be used to pay for as compensation for the person that we would identify or earmark? Or are those funds specifically earmarked for something else?
It's usually like the candy bars being sold
Right, it's
at
about
school.
what types of
Yeah,
products
well,
can be part of the
right.
fundraising. So for an individual school that may be raising funds for athletics or its library or
Oh,
something,
I see what
it's
you're
about
saying.
what can and can't be included in those.
In those items. But could you take that particular thing and use it to pay for? To do specific fundraisers?
As far as like at the individual schools, if that's
Yeah,
what they decided
exactly.
to
For the
use that
stipend.
for.
We had to look into the legality
Yeah.
of that.
Okay.
But the schools normally determine what it is that they might be using their funds for, so I don't know if
If
you
that
were
would be-
asking.
Right, we generally don't use fundraisers for operational costs. Creation of a school wellness champion is something that is being dictated by policy. If the district does not pay for that stipend, then you're passing on to the schools an unfunded mandate and requiring them to find the money to make this work, but you're requiring them to have it.
Which was the point of my original question, right?
I was trying to find a way for you.
Hey,
So
Good
for the
idea.
sake of time and discussion, individuals haven't looked at the policy. Does anybody have any specific questions or concerns about the policy as it's presented? Well, then I have one.
well, can I
Oh,
make one
please.
comment? I know Ms. Phillips and I have talked, and I think we even shared with the board publicly, even as the federal government has shifted some of the nutrition requirements and the healthier standards, we are not looking to move away from those in Norfolk Public Schools because we feel we have a responsibility as part of this policy as well as good general practice to encourage lower sodium foods, to deal with the content of things that couldn't be healthy, and then continue to provide fresh fruits and vegetables as part of our menu options, so.
I just have one under the revisions to the policy, some recommended language for the board to consider.
Yes.
The way I read it currently, it says that the policy committee in collaboration with the SHAC will review any recommendations to revise the policy.
Or which page are you on?
Want to change that to the school board.
Section 4
Section 4, okay.
was under section 4.
That's where it is.
So following our advisory committee policy and what we feel the role of the board is in setting policy, it would seem to me that the SHAC would make recommendations to the board. The board then would determine whether or not it wanted to refer those recommendations to the policy committee. The policy committee would review it, and we would be following this process. I think right now it reads as though the school board policy committee and the SHAC are parallel, and the school board policy committee is something that currently exists but may go away. So generally speaking, policy is a responsibility of the board. Advisory committees can make recommendations to the board on policy, but it's the school board's responsibility to accept any recommendations and revise policy, not the advisory committees,
Okay.
in my view.
Right, the advisory committee would be advising on recommendations.
Right, so the way I wrote it, right, was just that the SHAC may make recommendations to the board. The board may then refer it or act upon it. But it's the SHAC that makes the recommendation to the board, and then the board determines how it chooses to act upon those recommendations. I think that's consistent with all our other advisory committees as well.
You're right, yeah.
Anything else anyone have for our soon-to-be new and innovative, worked on for 5 years wellness
Oh,
policy?
now we get to go work on the regulation that goes along with it.
Yes. Any other questions, comments, thoughts from the policy committee members on this? Those of you all that worked on it, Ms. Phillips, I know you have a big smile, so please take an opportunity now while you have it. So.
Yes, it's been a long road, and I appreciate the committee's work. Ms. Bassine especially was very helpful in our committee, giving some board insight, parental insight as well. So I'm glad that we're here. I'm very excited. Thank you all for your support. And I'll say that the last time I was at the board meeting with you all, I went back and I told my staff the next morning that we are the luckiest school nutrition program probably in the entire country because we have such strong board support. I said I think every member of the board, the last time that I was with you all, said something positive about our program and about wellness, and it just made me feel really good about what we're doing. So I thank you all for that support.
Well, thank you for, indeed. You may say that out loud, please.
Thank you for your leadership. And even though the optics are horrible, I enjoyed riding the blender bike.
It's fun. You should all come ride the blender bike.
All right, so what the action will be is the policy with those minor revisions will appear on the consent agenda in an hour or so, and so we will adopt and act upon that policy. Any questions, concerns, or confusion about any of that?
Just want to, again, thank all who've been working with the policy. And then we'll have a busy summer working on the regulations to see how we move toward implementation.
As well as communicating the rollout.
Right, to the schools.
All right, thank you. Policy committee, we also have, I know other policies that are on the consent agendas. Anything that you just want to bring to the board's attention regarding any of the other policies that we have on the consent agenda?
Nothing specifically, but what we do have on the consent agenda for this evening are some policies that were from the February 2017 docket. And so we wanted to bring those to your attention. Most of those are just legal reference changes. We don't have any new policies posted for your review this evening. So if you have any questions about those policies, we're happy to answer those at this time.
And at one time, there was one there dealing with, was it grievance process? Did we pull that off for now?
That was pulled, and we have an existing policy that supports staff suspensions. And so I know Mr. Billups has had an opportunity to review that because it is new and has language that the board will most likely want to review with the administration. That was pulled, as well as the one related to the grievances.
All right, thank
Yeah.
you. Ms. Doyle?
Where are we with a suicide prevention policy?
That was pulled from this docket just because of time. We do plan to bring that to your attention, hopefully sometime during the summer. So we have discussed that.
Right, and we had
Yes.
sought public input on that, so we
Yes.
have that
Absolutely.
at this point.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
All right. Any final questions at all about policy or the policies that are going to be on the consent agenda? Everyone comfortable with that? All right. Thank you so much for all the hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
So finally, on the workshop, that brings us to the Educational Planning Steering Committee composition, and maybe Dr. Boone and I are going to tag team on this.
I'll let you start.
Of course. So, as you all know, you okay?
Yes, he was asking.
Oh, okay. So as you all know, with the work that has been ongoing with the Educational Facilities Planning Group, previously DeJean Richter, and currently, what's the current title? Consolidated Strategies, what is it?
Cooperative strategy.
Cooperative Strategies.
Cooperative strategy?
Yes.
I have to look.
Consolidated Grant, it's all in mine. When DeJean Richter then came and worked with the district before, we established a steering committee. It had about 47 people on it. I can't really remember and recall how it got comprised, but there were several members of the staff. We had city representation, representation from city council. You all know that as part of our discussion through the budget process and conversations we've had with the council about our overall planning process, that we had agreed that we would make sure moving forward that we would have participation from city departments as well as opportunities for council members to participate. I believe Dr. Whibley participated last time and Mr. Smeagol did, but I can't recall which hat he was wearing at the time. So in our advisory committee recommendations, we say that we try to make sure that we have a diverse participation. So several things. We've talked as a board having family and community engagement, increasing that is a priority for us. Trying to make sure that we have diversity. Dr. Boone and her team have kind of worked out, I guess, about 25 to 27 positions. Most of those individuals are either members of the school board staff, representative from the city, perhaps some other key stakeholders like the military, Greater Norfolk Corporation, individuals such as that. So as we were working on it, when I looked at that list, I had a couple of concerns. One, I didn't think that list was very diverse, geographically, socioeconomically, and so forth. But it kind of is what it is in terms of individuals that represent those positions. We still have a opportunity and I think a responsibility to make sure that we get parents and community stakeholders as a part of that committee. And so we were trying to figure out a number, and what I want to recommend to the board and kind of just talk through is if they already have about 25 to 27 individuals identified, there's 7 of us. There are another 3 or 4 categories that are being considered, whether we have someone from the faith community, someone from higher ed, those types of things. But I kind of want to put out there for the board that maybe we should take ownership of recommending maybe 2 individuals each to the collective, and we can then review as part of our process, quick process, because they want to get started in July, of 2 individuals that each board member could recommend to serve on the committee if they have interest. And then we would try to ensure through our recommendations that we are touching all parts of the city, trying to make sure that we are being as socially economically diverse in our recommendations, and trying to make sure that we have parents, families that have children with disability, whatever the case may be. But we would just take that on and reach out to community stakeholders that we know. We still have applications from individuals who applied for advisory board positions in the past. But if we could get kind of a description of the role and the responsibility of being on the committee, what's the time commitment, those types of things.
We actually have that prepared in terms of 1 to 2 meetings a month. And
right. And then we would take on the task of bringing some recommendations back relatively quickly, I would say by the first week in July at the latest. And we would vet them and go through a process, just as we often do in other areas. So I want to put that out there and just get any thoughts or feedback on that approach and our willingness to do something like that. Ms. Basine?
Do we want to also consider, say parents and community members, but do we want to be specific about the number that would be parents? Because we could all come back with, members that may or may not have children in the system. And
well, I mean, I leave that up to you. I just think that in our process that we try to lean towards making sure that we try to include individuals that we know have a current and future stake. I mean, as many parents as we can get, I think, is a positive. but we have to make sure that the time commitment and the meeting times are going to be convenient, for individuals. Reverend Haywood?
The group that has already been identified, is that geographically diverse, that group?
No, let me address that. What I presented, what we've been working on, drawn from the last advisory task force with educational planning that was done a few years ago, we looked at positions. So, principals, teachers, central office staff, facility staff as part of that. Looked at positions that the city had staffed before. So I believe the board chair talked with the mayor about who would be the council representative, because we did see one there. I've spoken with Doug Smith about who would be city staff, the couple of 3 positions from city staff that would support it. Talked with the chief of police relative to a recommendation. We worked with Dr. Birdsong and worked with the military to designate a representative from the military. So I've been taking it from the standpoint of what were the types of positions that populated the group before, and working toward with, like I say, city manager and others to be able to get that the more staffing type structures in place. Then so that will be dependent upon whichever leader or manager who they recommend to serve in those positions. So it's not dependent on geography, and that's where, again, the opportunity for names that come in from the board, parents and others would help us facilitate that piece.
Yeah, and we would send that list out, and frankly, what I was doing when I saw the list, I just started looking at it, and just as right now, we're not appointed by geography. I mean, if you were to do a ward thing, 2 of us are in 7, 5 are in 6. When you look at, many of the folks on the city side who are required to live in the city, for whatever reason, it tends to be more in 6 than in 7. So I just feel like we have to be more proactive. And if some of you all may recall when we reviewed some of the work with the John Richter, and they showed us where there were growth rates in the city, where births were happening and where they were not. When you look at at least when I was looking at the participation rate and those who were being on the committee, you found a lot of people who were not in the areas of the city where you were having the births, who are likely to be our customers, then being in a position to have to make significant long-term decisions for the rest of the division. So I just feel like if we send out that list, we can put into those columns our own efforts of trying to identify, these diversity characteristics right there in our policy already. And then we just try to make sure that in our recommendations that we find this balance between those who are there who are bringing certain expertise because of positions that they hold in government or in the private sector, and those that we want to make sure that community leaders and parents and teachers and whoever else may have an interest can truly represent that proudly diverse community that we say we want to be the cornerstone of.
Tracy Richter shared with us when we first started talking about the group that, the meetings get intense and they have some length to it. And he said they ended, while the numbers seemed large on that very first committee, you end up with a very strong core that's able to be there consistently and help. And so that's what we're trying to do, and make sure that the core is not just staff, but the core really does represent parents and others who can make that commitment.
And I remember last time, I practically begged some people to make sure that they participate, because we all know that these committees have a lot of influence. You all know over the years I've probably served on 100 of them. But it is very often the case that the committees will come forward with recommendations, and then people will feel that they didn't have input into the process. And so I just figure if we can try to have as much buy-in and make it as convenient for people as possible, not necessarily, I don't mean to say this, but not necessarily trying to make it convenient for staff to attend, but try to make it convenient for the parents and community stakeholders to attend.
And
then we can try to make sure. Yeah, he did. They met an evening. sometimes you couldn't get into the door because of the nobody was at the door, and you had to try to buzz in to get into the particular school. But I think if we can make sure those logistics are in place and we take ownership of it, then if anybody has any questions in the future about how did you get on the committee, how is it comprised, who was on it, it's on us. It's not on the administration. It's not on Tracy Richter. It's on the school board. Are you all comfortable with that approach?
Yep, and then you want names by July 1st?
Yeah, so we'll send out an email. I'll get the list that they've put in place, put the columns out, send it all out for you all for review, and once we're good, then we'll go to work. All right, that was the last thing that we currently have on the agenda for the workshop. Dr. Boone, anything else before we break prior to the business meeting?
No, I don't think, I'm looking at the team. Nope, I think we're good.
Anyone, school board, before we go into the business meeting? All right, so we're going to, Torian, anything? So let me say this. So this is the last meeting of the school year. And so after when we get to board matters, it'll be plenty of time for any thoughts or remarks that school board members would like to share with each other and with the public when we get into the business meeting. So we don't have to do that now. And we may have a significant number of people show up for community comment. So we'll see how that goes, depending upon the number of participants or individuals who sign up. I may be a little tighter on the 3 minutes than I normally am, just to make sure that everybody feels that they have a fair opportunity to be heard. But other than that, I'm just looking for a good opportunity for us to go and celebrate the end of a good school year and be prepared moving forward. Oh, I know, one final thing. Scheduling for the summer. So we're not going to have a meeting July 5th. There'll be no work session July 5th. We will meet July 19th. It'll be an extended work session. It will not be a business meeting. This is going to be where we will begin our process of dealing with the things that the board asked for us to address in terms of the parking lot, beginning to look at academic data as that stuff rolls out, and other things. So July 19th will be a work session style meeting, probably elongated. The August 2nd meeting will be likewise. And then for the third Wednesday, that will be where we'll still have a workshop style like we're doing now, but that'll be the first time when we will have the formal meeting with citizens' comment and so forth. But along the way, because of personnel matters at those work sessions, we may have time that we set aside either for a closed session to deal with personnel matters, and if the administration needs us to vote on anything, we would just do that there versus what we would typically do at a business meeting. So just want to make sure everybody is aware of
The 19th?
Yes, that third. You're talking about July or August?
July 19th.
Yes.
Yes.
How about August?
August, whatever is the third Wednesday, would still be the third Wednesday.
Okay.
The regular,
16th.
regular business meeting.
Right. And then also in July, we know we have board development training at
21st and
Friday
22nd.
and Saturday following the 19th meeting. Okay. Any question at all about the scheduling? Ms. Basine?
So elongated, starting at 1 p.m.?
We're going to have agenda plans. We need to work out that schedule. But absolutely. Yes.
Right. And we also have the VSBA conference.
Yeah, for those who are attending, the conference on education is the Tuesday before the Wednesday, I think it is. Yes. All right. Anything else? Mr. Spree?
I just wanted to throw it out there what I spoke to you about. So as I move on with my life, I recently got my first actual job. I work for Nike now, and I look to definitely grow within that company. And immediately starting, I started on June 15th. I was presented an opportunity to extend to the board and the members and hear your thoughts about it. Nike Team Norfolk, the company itself actually is very big on supporting the local community, in particular the youth, my aspect in a lot of things. And so Nike Team Norfolk has already conducted 2 events for Norfolk Public Schools. They have held a field day for Norview Elementary and Fairlawn Elementary. Nike, though, wants to see what exactly they can do for Norfolk Public Schools and its youth. They sponsor, volunteer, and host tons of events, youth active events. So definitely want to see what exactly the company can benefit for the school system and its students, and see what the board may think about with having a very big host right in your backyard, eager to help with many, many events.
Dr. Boone's okay if I ask if Dr. Birdsong come back to the. So, Torian brought this forward, and I recommended that he share it with Dr. Birdsong as part of her role with the wraparound. So, just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to that, and also while you're at the table, can you just share with the board the process if board members here during this summer of individuals in the community who would like to be mentors in our schools?
Absolutely. So I have connected with Torian, and so we have a plan to move forward with bringing Nike into our schools, finding out what the needs are, and then trying to address those needs. And so as far as mentors are concerned, there will be a mentor coordinator working within my department, Tiffany Palmer. Mr. Jordan had an opportunity to meet her a couple of weeks ago, and so she is gung-ho and doing a fabulous job. And so what she's doing right now, she has reached out to some community members through the system that Carlos has in place now. So we were looking for some mentors for some of our kids during summer leave. So if you are aware of any individuals or groups who are interested in providing mentorship for our children, you can contact me directly. I will put you in contact with Tiffany Palmer, or if you can just give me the names of the organizations or community members who are interested, we will follow up with them and put them to work, because we have a lot of children who would benefit from this.
I think that was one of the things we had in our parking lot, and just by chance I met Ms. Palmer in passing, and so I just want to make sure that we had communicated to the board, because I know we always talk about that, that there is a process, there is a contact for individuals who are interested in being mentors and going through the background check process and all of that to be matched. So,
Yes.
Dr. Gabriel?
Can you send us her information so we can connect it
Certainly.
with the individuals, because her name might be important to put in like Civic League newsletters,
Okay.
so that way they can connect that way, because that's usually where I get the questions about how do I become a mentor.
Okay.
And then basically she might want to have a little description as to what the process is to become a mentor in
Okay.
Norfolk Public Schools.
Absolutely. And if you're interested in being a mentor, please let me know.
We are. We're going for the next
That would be.
for the
I'm
next
actually
student
looking
school
for a
board
mentor.
rep. We're all going to be mentors for that person.
Someone
So.
be my mentor.
All right, anything else for the workshop? All right, hearing none, I'm going to adjourn this meeting, and we will gather at 6:50 for the business meeting. Adjourn.